Healthcare workers roll up their sleeves for the first COVID vaccine shots in America. Google leads the way on the so-called flexible Workweek, and Mariah Carey back on top of the charts. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Tuesday, December 15th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Good morning, Carlo.
Morning, Wags. Speaking of Google, have you recovered from that big Google outage yesterday morning that took us all down for a while there?
You know what I realized it was about 6:45 Eastern time, approximately, and I realized how reliant I am on all things Google. So there was no Gmail, so I couldn't email, and we use Gmail here at work. So it was my personal email, my work email, my Nest. I have a Nest device that I use to watch and say good morning to my daughter while I'm at work. So I couldn't do my usual, spying on her, see what's going on and saying hello. No Google Docs, which we use to collaborate for the podcast. Yep. So if this outage had happened even 30 minutes earlier, it would have put yesterday's podcast in jeopardy because that's our living document that we write
amazing,
this.
Right?
If Waze was down, so Google also owns Waze. I was thinking about this. I use Waze religiously to get to work when I'm in the office and to get home. So it would have been a lot longer for me to do that. They've just basically demonstrating how just pervasive Google is in every aspect of our life.
Jill, I saw somebody post yesterday a picture of their neighbor's house, and they had one of those Nest doorbells, and there was a Post-it note over the doorbell that said, "Google's down, just knock." And I was like, this is like the picture of the year, right?
We have that too, by the way. We have the Ring doorbell. It's Google, right? Or is that Amazon?
Ring is Amazon.
Okay, yeah. So we have the Ring we have from Amazon, but it is a crazy world we're living in, Carlo. All right, let's get to some news. Frontline healthcare workers across the U.S. now in the process of receiving the first dose of the Pfizer and BioNTech coronavirus vaccine. It's almost a year after the first cases of COVID-19 were reported in Wuhan, China. This mass vaccination campaign started as the U.S. crossed 300,000 deaths from the virus. Dr. Fauci said in an interview on MSNBC that Americans without underlying conditions should start to be able to get vaccinated by late March or early April, and he predicted herd immunity will be reached in the U.S. by the early summer.
Jill, if I were to told you this time last year that one of the biggest thrills you'd get in 2020 was watching live TV of people in the doctor's office getting shots, right? But really, it was thrilling. Yes, it was thrilling. It was really thrilling to watch this. It was so awesome, especially just to see some of these folks who have, some of these healthcare workers who have just given so much this year to be rightfully prioritized. I literally had chills watching it. It just shows you how strange these times are. But I'm glad you mentioned Fauci. That struck me. That seems to be a little bit sooner than he had been saying in the past. So I took that to be newsworthy when I saw that cross yesterday. Look, my mindset personally continues to be I'm assuming that me and most of the people I know are going to be vaccinated by Memorial Day. Anything sooner than that to me is cream. Right? That's sort of how I'm positioning my headspace for these next few months. We're so close, and this really does now feel like a light at the end of the tunnel. My dad used to have this saying, I don't know if I can say it on air, but it was basically like, you can shovel what into the ocean for a couple months as long as it's only a couple months. And I don't really know what that means, but what he's trying to say is like people can put up with anything if they know that it's temporary. And I really feel that. And I think that everyone is sort of on this page now, right? We've got to get through these next few months. Just remember our mantra, our Need to Know mantra, right? Every day that you don't get and spread the coronavirus is a success, even if you get nothing else done that day. Also, by the way,
I appreciate that. I do appreciate that, but it's a hard, harder said than done.
Of course,
because
yes.
If you're somebody like me who has to be out in the public, just who can't just stay home, you realize it's not as easy as you think, because while you could be as responsible, as ever, we're
Right.
all in this together. So if somebody else is not responsible, it has this ripple effect, and there unfortunately are a lot of people who just don't care. And that's the
I know,
problem.
it's really frustrating. Yeah, no, and obviously that mantra is not meant to, like, shame you if God forbid you were to get sick. But it's just, I think it just really helps me in terms of really trying to, like, temper our expectations about what else we're expected to do these next few months. By the way, I did want to mention, I want to give a shout out to President Trump. I mean, he said we would get the first shots this year and that it would be a miracle. He was right. I never would have thought this. I thought for sure we were looking at another few months of vaccine trials. It is a miracle. I mean, it's not literally a miracle. It's the work of some incredibly dedicated employees of these two companies. There was a really good TikTok, which is sort of in the news business what we call like a news story that sort of just goes into the that does like the TikTok of something that happened. It was about the Pfizer vaccine and just how they got this thing, going over the last few months. And it just talked about the CEO of that company who was just pushing people faster, more, sooner. Like, he did not let up, and he just wrung it out of all of his employees. It's really remarkable piece of journalism.
I think it's great. I mean, Sandra Lindsay, she's a nurse at Long Island Jewish Medical Center. She was vaccinated live on TV Monday. I think she was the first person in New York, or one of the first people in New York who got the vaccine.
Yep.
I thought one of the quotes that she said, this resonated with me. She said to Anderson Cooper, after getting the vaccine, she said, "I have no fear. I trust my profession is deeply rooted in science. What I don't trust is getting COVID-19, because I don't know how it will affect me and the people around me that I could potentially transfer the virus to." And it's funny, I was chatting with my dad about it, and one of his friends, who's his age, is tested positive for COVID, but is asymptomatic. And I said to my dad, I was like, please do not let down your guard. This does not mean that is the course that this virus will take on you. And one of the fears, because so many public people are getting tested, especially athletes and coaches and whatever, is you do see that there are a lot of people who get this, and it is no big deal, right? And you don't want for that to create this false sense of security, because for every one of those people, there's another person who's getting it and not making it, or having a really, really, severe time with it. Of course, we crossed 300,000 deaths in this country. Sanjay Gupta, also, he tweeted, I thought interestingly, he said, "I've been thinking about the beginning of one of my favorite books, A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." And I think that really accurately explains kind of where we are right now.
Yeah,
a lot of
absolutely.
hope, but a long way to go.
Yep.
Quickly on to politics. The Electoral College officially confirmed Joe Biden as president-elect in a smooth and decisive vote with no electors defecting. The final tally was 306 electoral votes for Biden and 232 for President Trump, the exact same margin that Trump won in 2016. In an address to the country following the vote, President-elect Biden said it's time to turn the page on the election. He praised state and local officials who defended the system from attempts to subvert it, and pledged again to be, quote, a president for all Americans. Now, Carlo, usually we don't get a big speech after the Electoral College vote. It's usually just like this mundane, bureaucratic event. But Biden clearly hoping that this will turn the page after these last 6 weeks since the election.
Yeah, I think everybody's sort of hoping that at this point. Putin, this morning, he has called to congratulate Biden on a win. Many congressional Republicans still have refused to do so, though more Senate Republicans have come out in the last 12 hours or so, last night and this morning, sort of acknowledging that he is now the president-elect. Meanwhile, on the topic of politics, Attorney General William Barr, he's leaving the Trump administration early after having fallen out with the president since the election. Barr is resigning as of December 23rd. Quote, to spend the holidays with his family. That's according to a tweet from President Trump last night. The decision to resign was said to be Barr's alone, coming after he acknowledged that the Justice Department found no widespread vote in this election, despite the president's claims. That, of course, infuriated the president, as did Barr's decision to not announce an investigation into Hunter Biden during the campaign. So he is out. Deputy AG Jeff Rosen will run the DOJ for the final month of the Trump presidency.
He wrote a statement. His statement was praising President Trump. It doesn't. It sounds like maybe this is. I don't know. They maybe both came to the determination, but there's only a month left of this presidency. So the fact that he didn't stick it out until the end, certainly there's an underlying message here. And a little bit of trivia for you, Carlo. Did you know that Bill Barr was only one of 2 people to serve in this role for 2 presidents? He'd served twice.
Who was the other one? The other president he served for?
H.W. Bush. He was Attorney General.
Oh, yeah. Right. Interesting. Jill, you learn something new every day. Here.
All right, turning to a little tech news. Google telling its employees they should prepare for offices to reopen next September, a few months later than planned. Once that happens, the company will start testing a flexible work week in which staffers are expected to be in the office for at least 3 days and can work remotely for the other 2 days. It's kind of a hybrid model. It's gaining traction as companies try to figure out what their work from home policies are going to be post-vaccination. It's also an endorsement from Google that could go a long way in getting more big employers on board with this flexible policy. These tech companies have been leading the way with everything this whole time in terms of either shutting the office, working remotely. They've kind of always taken the lead on this. So I do think this is an important story.
Definitely, and Google especially, and just by virtue of the fact that they're so big, and I think that once they start doing this, it is what you said. You're going to get a lot more smaller companies being like, look, if Google's doing it, maybe we should do it. To that point, Viacom CBS also announcing something similar in the recent days. I'm thinking that this is sort of going to become the model, right? You're either 3 or 4 days in the office, 1 day remote, maybe 2 if your job sort of calls for that. Of course, it's going to vary by industry, right? And this is sort of irrelevant to people who don't work in offices. But as I've said, I think anything that puts more power into the hands of workers after this is good by me, right? Flexibility is the name of the game these days.
I think that this is the way it's going to go, especially given that and not to be like a Debbie Downer here, but we don't really know how long the vaccine lasts, right? So we don't know if we're going to see kind of another resurgence in the fall of this thing. Are we going to need, if everyone gets vaccinated, hopefully by spring, how long do those vaccinations last? I don't know, a lot of questions, but I agree with you. I think flexibility, these hybrid models is kind of the way it's going to go. The only negative, we did a whole special on this last week on Cheddar, and I was talking to one of these experts who looks at the workplace and he's a job recruiter, and he said, one of the things is that you don't get as much face time, right? So especially for younger workers, the whole kind of inter-office dynamic is going to change, right? It's likely that if you're a younger worker and you're single, you'll probably want to go into the office 5 days a week, maybe try to get some face time with the boss. But it's likely that a lot of the managers who have kids and who are maybe a little bit more advanced in their career, they're going to be the ones who say, all right, maybe I do want to work from home 2 or 3 days a week.
Interesting.
So they're going to have, I don't know, there's fewer opportunities, I think, to get a mentor, to have these in-person relationships. I've always found them incredibly valuable, personally, in my career.
Absolutely, and not to mention, are there going to be people who are like, well, I'm going in 5 days a week, and then you're like, oh, you're like a brown noser, now I'm gonna have to go in. Who knows, right? There's always these unintended consequences, right?
All right, before we get to the next story, if you're looking for your next listen, check out Who Is. It is a podcast from iHeartRadio and Now This. And it'll bring you some deep dives into the backstories of the power players that shape our politics, from Nancy Pelosi to Mitch McConnell. The host, Sean Morrow, delves into how the world's most powerful people became who they are today, where they came from, how they think, and what they might influence next. Find Who Is on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now back to the news. On a similar topic, Carlo, Larry Ellison, the billionaire founder of Oracle, says he's moving to Hawaii following his company's decision to move its HQ from Silicon Valley to Austin, Texas. Ellison's the latest in a string of high-profile, aka rich Californians who are leaving the state. Elon Musk and Joe Rogan have both recently decamped for the Lone Star State, which notably does not have an income tax. The legendary investor Carl Icahn has left New York City for Florida. And we've talked about some of the financial heavyweights like Deutsche Bank and Goldman considering at least moving some of their offices to Florida. So here we go, the exodus.
Yeah, and it's not just the wealthy. both San Francisco and New York City have lost residents this year, while cities like Austin, Phoenix, Nashville, St. Louis, a bunch of the sort of like mid-level in terms of population American cities have gained people. It's really this is a really interesting trend, one of the most interesting trends of the year, I think. And it makes sense to a degree, right? These cities like New York that we live in, San Francisco, they're really expensive, and you sort of make this deal with the devil when you move here, that you're going to live in like a crappy apartment, or or pay ridiculous prices for everything because of the proximity to the culture and the nightlife and the restaurants, et cetera. So when there's nothing to do because nothing's open, the trade-off becomes much less attractive. Again, makes sense. That said, I mean, I think that cities like New York and San Francisco are going to be having a huge renaissance coming post-vaccine if they don't go bankrupt first, which is a big if. But by the way, as for Larry Ellison, he's not going to Hawaii for tax reasons. Obviously, Hawaii is a high tax state. I think it might even have higher taxes than California. But he will not have a hard time finding new digs in Hawaii, given that he owns an entire Hawaiian island. So it's hard to blame him.
In terms of New York City, I can't help but feel a sense of sadness every time I hear about this exodus from New York, just because of my love for this city. But when we talk about even this flexible work week, even if you have to be in twice a week or 3 days a week, you still need to be near the office in some capacity, right? If you're not fully remote, I don't think you're going to be fully gone. But I agree. I think cities are, I would never count out a city like New York, but it did get way too expensive. So maybe a little bit of coming down from that peak is going to be
that could be a good thing. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay, the next couple of weeks may be among the most critical ever for the shipping and delivery industry. We're already dealing with sustained high demand because of the pandemic. Companies like UPS, FedEx handling what's expected to be a record number of holiday deliveries, plus the first vaccine shipments. A major winter storm this week is going to add even more pressure. That storm expected to hit the Northeast tomorrow, bringing at least 6 to 8 inches of snow. It's probably, we're talking in the Philly suburbs up through New York City and Boston, with more inland. So Carlo,
it's coming.
Better order your gifts ASAP.
I guess I'm going to have to work from home during the snowstorm. Oh, wait, I already spent all day in this apartment. By the way, on a separate note, have we talked about, do kids have snow days this year? Is this something that we have discussed?
We haven't discussed it, but my husband and I were talking about this yesterday, because our nieces and nephews are in school, and I don't believe they have snow days because they can all do it remote.
That is a major bummer, man. There's nothing better than a good snow day, right? I put my as for the holiday shopping, I did put my orders in yesterday, taking my own advice. I've got one more gift to go, and I'm done. But I'm starting to get into the Christmas spirit over here, Jill. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling nice and hopeful.
We need a Christmas tree in your background, Carlo. There's still sort of this leafy palm tree or something.
It's to the left of me. I'll try and bring it in the shot tomorrow.
Okay, and finally, it is that time of year again. Mariah Carey's "All I Want for Christmas Is You" is the top song in the United States, re-entering the Billboard charts at #1. The 1994 holiday favorite leads the Billboard Hot 100. The second consecutive year this hit single has topped the chart. It's also #1 in the UK for the first time. Carey has spent 83 weeks in the top spot. That's the most of any artist in history. I remember when this song first came out. I loved it back then, and it still puts me in a good mood.
Do you remember covering this last year when it hit #1 for the first time? And we were talking about how funny it was that she recorded the song 25 years ago and it just hit #1. Rihanna is way back in second place at 60 weeks in terms of that Billboard record. She's followed by the Beatles at 59 weeks. More trivia for you there. I have to say, though, holiday content in general just seems like a really good recurring revenue model, as they say, right?
Totally.
Like, you do it once. If you look at the top movies on iTunes right now, it's like Elf.
Right.
All of these old Christmas movies. It's like you do it once, it pays out forever. It's brilliant. If I were an artist, like an actor or a singer, that would be my moneymaker.
Every year, Carlo, that's a great point.
Right?
There are radio stations that start playing Christmas music starting, I believe, Thanksgiving, 106.7 here in New York. And I know this because I am Jewish, but I happen to love Christmas music.
I did know that about you, actually.
All right, we're going to leave it there. That's what you need to know for Tuesday, December 15th.
Bye, guys.